The Montreal Screwjob was a whole 25 years ago, and while I've previously covered what if it was a work, what if it never happened, and why it's bad, I never stopped to talk about why it's important, particularly to that of us fans and our fan experience. As somehow that's the part of the equation that seemingly gets overlooked the most, especially by us. Well, now it's time to change all that, even if it did take 25 years, because today... A big thank you to my awesome supporters over on Patreon like Middle Kingdom Wrestling and Dakari Garmin. Thank you so much, and to get your own Patreon shout out, please sign up over on my Patreon page. Alright, real quick before we get into the video, please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel as a member of the Know-It-All Nation, and also make sure that your notifications are working, that way you know whenever a brand new video comes out or a live stream. Anyway, with that being said, let's get into it. Alright, look, I'm not here to talk about whether or not the Montreal Screwjob was a work, and I'm also not here to debate with any of you Screwjob apologists out there. I've already done that in previous videos. Although I may have to bring those issues up here and there just to prove my greater point, which we should not lose focus of. Because that's the very reason why we're talking about the Montreal Screwjob yet again here today, as I think a lot of us fans tend to lose sight of the most important point of view out there. What point of view is that? Well, I'm talking about things from the fan perspective, which is something I feel gets often overlooked. Strange considering that all of us are fans, and also because the fan POV is superior in certain categories over that of the points of view of people in the industry. Now don't get me wrong, there are plenty of things that insiders know that fans will never know and can never even comprehend. But of course, this sword does cut both ways, and there are just some things that pure fans see better than those who actually work in wrestling. Not to mention the fact that the wrestling business is only a business because we fans make it one. It's our money that goes to ticket sales, it's our money that goes to merchandise sales. And even though ad revenue is a major source of income, we have to remember that these companies are only advertising with wrestling because they're hoping to get our attention and get our money. So again, it all comes back to us. And something else we should also keep in mind is that while it's true that most fans will never work in the industry, we should do our best to remember that most of the people who work in the industry are indeed fans, meaning that the fan perspective is the most abundant opinion out there. But despite all this, many fans still try to view things from the inside, ignoring the value that their experience as a fan has, which is a real shame because this particular perspective is very easy to lose sight of once you're on the inside looking out. Okay, so now that I've stressed the importance of remembering our own fan experiences, I guess the best way to talk about the Montreal Screwjob would be to talk about my own fan experience with the Montreal Screwjob. Originally, I thought the Montreal Screwjob was a work, but I don't mean like a conspiracy work, I mean just like a regular storyline, same as anything else. But wait, let's go back to when it first happened. Because my initial reaction was, I can't believe they're making Bret Hart lose to his own move, and especially to Shawn Michaels of all people. But then this was followed up by some relief when they mentioned on Monday Night Raw that Bret never tapped, and they showed it on air. Jim Ross and Vince McMahon even had a sit-down interview talking about the situation, and by then we all knew that Bret was going to WCW, just like Hogan, Hall, and Nash, and seemingly just about everybody else from WWF. And that was pretty much all there was to it. I had simply assumed because they were talking about it on television, it must be part of a storyline, it must be part of an angle. The idea that it was somehow a secret scheme never even dawned on me, because where's the secret? And so I just thought it was a clever way to write Bret off, still protecting him in his loss but getting the belt off of him. It wasn't until years later when people started talking about it as some sort of Machiavellian plot that I even thought to view it that way. And I'm sure there are going to be plenty of people in the comment section who swear they always looked at it like that ever since the very beginning. And to that I say, well, congratulations. Now, as annoying as comments like that tend to be, they are in part kind of what I'm talking about here. Because as far as I'm concerned, and as far as the fans are concerned, I think the Montreal Screwjob changed how we talk, how we debate pro wrestling, and also how exactly we view it in the first place. Now, I know that it's a common misconception that there's no more kayfabe and that the internet exposed the business, but the reality is, and going back to the fan perspective and always knowing about something, the fans certainly always knew that professional wrestling was predetermined. And just like it's not true that the internet exposed the business, it's also not true that kayfabe has completely disappeared from our screens. We as fans, even smart fans, get worked all the time. For instance, if you hear something on a podcast or a media scrum, you're bound to believe that it's true. And hey, it may be, it may not be. The point of the matter is that most of us don't even stop to question any of this, even though we all know that this is an industry that's designed specifically to lie to us. And don't get me wrong, there were fans of course who got work back in the day, there always was. My point is that the smart fan is not a new invention, and it definitely wasn't birthed from the internet. However, that's not to say that our whole relationship with pro wrestling and kayfabe hasn't changed. Fans, even the ones that knew better, used to allow themselves to get immersed in the kayfabe much more. They used to allow themselves to believe and to get into it. Fans used to surrender to being fans instead of trying to be insiders. And in a lot of ways, the wrestlers used to take kayfabe more seriously too. I mean, Ric Flair got up and walked away from a plane crash in order to protect the business. Well, then again, maybe he didn't. Who's to say what really happened? Since I wasn't there, I have no idea. And that's something else that has changed with us fans. Because something the internet has done is it's given us the expectation that we're supposed to and we're entitled to know everything. How wrestling matches are put on, what happens backstage. We feel like we're privy to all that information. And we're extremely uncomfortable with the idea that we may never know something. What really happened after All Out with CM Punk and the Elite? What really happened on a certain plane ride? And what really went down with the Montreal Screwjob are all things we may never know as fans. And we should really just make peace with that. But yet we don't, as the IWC seems to be in a never-ending battle with itself, even over things that should be pretty one-sided. I mean, Jinder Mahal, WWE Champion, bad. David Arquette, WCW World Champion, bad. Montreal Screwjob, bad. But yet there are still apologists out there who will make excuses for why all those things weren't horrible, even though they definitely were. And while I am perfectly aware that trolling contrarian idiots, I mean, people who think differently, are everywhere all across the internet and talking about a lot of things outside of wrestling, my point is that the Montreal Screwjob gave people on both sides of the line a different way to talk about wrestling and a different way to perceive it. Because whether it's a work or not, I feel that the Montreal Screwjob gave us just a little bit of insight on the inside perspective, and as a result, we turned that into endless amounts of conversation. And as I said earlier, I don't think that kayfabe ever really went anywhere, I simply think that it changed form. And the Montreal Screwjob showed the entire industry that backstage drama can be more effective and more powerful and sometimes more entertaining than the on-screen stuff ever could be, whether or not it's actually real. And in the end, isn't that what kayfabe is all about? Oh, and just keep in mind, the word important doesn't necessarily always mean good. And when you stop to look at it that way, it becomes quite clear that the greatest trick that kayfabe ever pulled was convincing the world that it doesn't exist. Well, there you go, my thoughts on why the Montreal Screwjob changed the entire fan experience, but what do you think about this subject? Let me know down in the comments, and please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel and that you give this video a big like. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all my awesome Patreons out there. And as always, Dave knows.